Think about the first time you tried something that other people seemed to love. Maybe it was black coffee, maybe it was wine, maybe it was modern art, maybe it was a fragrance everyone insisted was incredible. Whatever it was, there's a good chance your reaction was the same. I don't get it. And that's strange because many of the things people eventually describe as refined, sophisticated, or high quality are often the very things they disliked at first. The bitterness of coffee, the complexity of wine, the abstract nature of art, the unusual character of certain fragrances. If these things are truly better, why don't we enjoy them immediately? Researchers have spent decades trying to answer that question, and some of what they've discovered is very interesting. In one famous study, participants were given wine and asked to rate how much they enjoyed it. The catch? Some of the wines were exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the price tag. When participants believed they were drinking the more expensive wine, they consistently reported enjoying it more. And brain scans suggested they genuinely experienced more pleasure. The wine hadn't changed, but their experience of it had. This raises a bigger question. How much of what we enjoy is actually our own preference, and how much of it is something we've learned? The first time I smelled a fragrance built around oud, I didn't understand the appeal at all. If you're unfamiliar with oud, it's one of the most prized materials in perfumery. Some people describe it as luxurious, sophisticated, mysterious. Others compare it to a barn. And honestly, both reactions make sense. The first encounter with something highly regarded is often disappointing. The same thing happens with black coffee. Most people don't take a sip and immediately think, now I understand. Instead, they're confused, and that's what fascinates me. I remember thinking I must be missing something. This material had been described as one of the most treasured ingredients in perfumery. People spoke about it with almost mythical reverence. And yet my reaction wasn't admiration, it was confusion. For a moment, I even wondered if enthusiasts were pretending, if perhaps everyone was simply convincing themselves they liked it because they were supposed to. Of course, I eventually learned that wasn't the case. But that experience, it reveals something important. Sometimes when we encounter something unfamiliar, we're not actually judging the thing itself. We're judging our ability to understand it. Again and again, the things enthusiasts obsess over are often the same things beginners struggle to appreciate. This suggests something important. Maybe our preferences aren't nearly as fixed as we think they are. Maybe taste isn't something we discover. Maybe it's something we develop. Psychologists have a name for part of what's happening: the mere exposure effect. The idea is surprisingly simple. The more often we're exposed to something, the more likely we are to develop a preference for it. Not always, but often. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Music, food, fashion, fragrance. The first time something enters your life, it feels unfamiliar. The 10th time, it feels different. The 100th time, it can feel comforting. Think about a song you couldn't stand when it first came out, and imagine hearing it every day for a month. Eventually, something changes. The song hasn't changed. You have. The same thing happens with fragrance. The first time someone smells a challenging niche perfume, they might find it strange or even unpleasant. Then they smell it again and again, and eventually they begin noticing details that were invisible before. What once smelled harsh becomes interesting. What once smelled confusing becomes sophisticated. And the strange part is, this isn't always a conscious decision. Your brain is constantly learning what deserves attention, what feels familiar, what feels rewarding. This brings us back to that wine experiment. The researchers didn't just discover that people preferred expensive wine. They discovered that expectation changed the experience itself. The same wine, different label, different perception. And it isn't just casual consumers. Researchers have repeatedly found that even highly experienced people can be influenced by context. In some experiments, wines received dramatically different evaluations depending on how they were presented. The liquid didn't change, the story around it did. And that's what makes this so fascinating. We like to imagine our preferences are objective, that we carefully evaluate things on their own merits. But the reality is, our brains are constantly interpreting information through expectations, assumptions, and context. We don't just experience products, we experience the stories attached to them. In other words, our brains don't simply react to reality. They react to what we believe reality to be. Exposure only explains part of the story. Because if repeated exposure were enough, we'd all end up liking the same things, and we don't. One person becomes obsessed with watches, another with fashion, another with coffee or fragrance. Why? Because eventually taste stops being about enjoyment and starts becoming about identity. Think about the things you care most deeply about. Music, style, books, fragrance. Whatever it is, chances are you don't just consume it. You think about it. You talk about it. You notice details other people overlook. And over time, it becomes part of how you see yourself. A fragrance isn't just a smell. A watch isn't just a tool. A piece of clothing isn't just fabric. They become symbols, ways of expressing values, interests, experiences, and aspirations. The things we love eventually become part of our identity. And that's where taste becomes powerful. Because what we consider good taste isn't entirely personal. It's also social. It's shaped by the people around us, the communities we join, the conversations we have, the things we repeatedly encounter. In a strange way, your taste is almost like a biography, a record of where you've been and what you've learned to value. And once you start looking at taste this way, it's difficult to unsee. The fragrances you're drawn to, the clothes you wear, the music you listen to, the cafes you spend time in. They often reveal less about what is objectively good and more about the life you've lived. Taste begins to look less like a collection of preferences and more like a trail of experiences. And that's a much more uncomfortable idea. It suggests that some of the things we consider our own preferences may not be entirely our own. And then something unexpected happens. The deeper people go into a hobby, the less impressed they often become by the things that impressed them at the beginning. And fragrance enthusiasts often stop focusing on brand names and start focusing on composition. In fashion, people stop noticing logos and start noticing craftsmanship. At first, that seems backwards. Shouldn't expertise make people care more about luxury? Often it does the opposite. Expertise changes what people pay attention to. A beginner sees status, an expert sees details. A beginner sees a famous name, an expert sees execution. The object hasn't changed. What changed is their ability to see it. That's the real paradox of taste. The deeper your understanding becomes, the less you need obvious signals to tell you what's valuable. In many cases, true expertise doesn't make people more impressed by expensive things. It makes them more selective, more independent, more capable of forming their own judgments. This means the journey of taste isn't always toward luxury. Sometimes it's toward authenticity, toward learning what genuinely resonates with you, even when nobody else notices. So maybe expensive taste isn't really about expensive things. Maybe it's about exposure, identity, experience. The people around us, the things we choose to pay attention to. Over time, those influences quietly teach us what to value, what to notice, what to desire. And that's why the most interesting question isn't whether your taste is expensive, it's whether your taste is truly your own. Because every preference you have today was once completely foreign to you, and the person you'll be 10 years from now may value things that seem strange to you today.